Ok.
Bem-vindo a todos e a todas para mais uma atividade da Cátedra de Estudos Irlandeses William Butler Yeats para compartilhar o resultado de uma pesquisa internacional conjunta sobre uma personagem histórica irlandesa que morou no Brasil e deixou um grande legado histórico para nós e o mundo, aquilo que chamamos da defesa dos direitos humanos. Os que precisarem de certificado e podem se inscrever no link Event 3. And, yes, ok. And hoje contamos com vários convidados que trabalharam nas traduções do Diário da Amazônia de Roger Casement ao espanhol, ao português, e ao italiano e também para um documentário. So welcome to this roundtable entitled Translating the Amazon Journal of Roger Casement. The Amazon has always been the center of global attention in the last decades, and as this is the Global Environment Week, the world turns its attention to the richest Brazilian region due to its rare minerals and biodiversity, but also to the environmental abuse and human crimes that were present in the past and are still present today. Roger Casement, who was British consul in Brazil in 1906 in Santos, in 1907 in Belém do Pará, and in 1908 in Rio de Janeiro, witnessed those crimes of humanity against the indigenous peoples of the Amazon region and against nature when he traveled to the Putumayo as member of the Commission of Inquiry sent by British government in 1910 and in 1911. He wrote reports, diaries, and journals denouncing all these crimes. So I am very honored to introduce you the historian Dr. Angus Michiles, whose work on Roger Casement has contributed to a critical re-evaluation of Casement's centrality to the intellectual history of pre-1916 world and to the history of human rights. Michiles' published editions of Casement's writings include The Amazon Journal of Roger Casement in 1997, Sir Roger Casement's Heart of Darkness, the 1911 documents, published in 2003, and One Bold Deed of Open Treason, the Berlin Diary of Roger Casement, published in 2016. He is the best knowledgeable researcher to introduce us to Casement's legacy. So please, Angus, the floor is yours.
Laura, thanks very much. If you'll forgive me and my technological shortcomings, I just want to share the screen with you.
Yes, it's coming. Perfect. Put full screen.
Full screen.
It is the...
You see that?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Good. Okay. Hello, everyone. The death of the Irish critic Seamus Deane last month prompted many to reach out for his books and remember the immense contribution he has made to Irish learning and criticism. His 1997 study, Strange Country, Modernity and Nationhood, ends with a chapter called Boredom and Apocalypse, a National Paradigm, and a critique of Irish historiography and what he called the, quote, rhetoric of revisionism. A key part of Deane's argument was to consider the idea of the apocalyptic experience of Irish history. And I really want to suggest now that the Casement stories belong to that apocalyptic experience, lived out as his life was between the aftermath of the Irish famine and the 1916 rebellion. In 1992, while attending the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, I became involved with the environmental zeitgeist that whipped around the world. And it was then that I began a gradual immersion in the Amazon and its past and present. 5 years later, the real terms with the publication of the Amazon Journal. And about that time, I met the Brazilian director, Aurélio Michiles, who would go on to adapt the book into a film, Segredos do Putumayo. This moment has been a long time in coming. So in this very brief presentation, I want to try and just give some context to what has been achieved during the last 30 years. So let me begin with a very specific reference to the source for this story. There are two versions of the Amazon Journal held in the National Library of Ireland in Dublin. The first is the manuscript version that Casement kept as he traveled to and through the region between the 23rd of September and the 6th of December 1910. There is also a typescript version of this manuscript. This was transcribed at the very start of 1913 and was submitted as evidence to the Parliamentary Select Committee inquiry held in London. The Amazon Journal was first published in 1997 in Dublin by Lilliput Press and in London by Anaconda Editions, and became the first of 3 edited volumes of Casement manuscript material. In 2003, the state-run Irish Manuscripts Commission published Sir Roger Casement's Heart of Darkness, the 1911 documents, which contained a considerable amount of supplementary material relevant to Casement's Putumayo investigation. And then in 2016, Marian Press published One Bold Deed of Open Treason, the Berlin Diary of Roger Casement, 1914 to 16, an edition of Casement's wartime diary. In terms of translation, there have been to date 3, as I call it, authorized versions. There was a Spanish version translated by Sonia Fernández Ordás, who is here, and published in 2011 by Eduardo Riestra of Ediciones del Viento. And I have to say that Eduardo runs an extraordinarily active publishing house that has produced a stream of travel books over the last 2 decades. And it's really tremendous work. And then in 2016, we had a Brazilian-Portuguese version organized by Professor Laura Izarra and Mariana Bolfarine and a number of other translators, Mail, who's here too, I think. And that was organized through the University of Sao Paulo and the vibrant Irish Studies Center based there and set up by Munira Mutran. This had a very fruitful flowering of Casement-related events. We held lots of different supplementary events in and around the publication of this book, including exhibitions, symposia, and a special edition of ABE, the Brazilian Journal of Irish Studies. And I really have to say that Laura in particular has just been a constant and tremendous source of support, a great catalyst for the story, and really a great advocate for really pushing the boundaries of this story into areas which I would never have thought of. And then the third translation is in the works at the moment and about to be published by Franco Esposito-Soekardi of Fuorilinea and translated by Romina Arena, who I see for the first time today, and it's great to meet you, Romina. And I should perhaps say that both the Portuguese and Italian versions have forewords by Ireland's President Michael D. Higgins. They're different prefaces or forwards, but they show that there is a very high level of buy-in, if you like, to the Amazon Journal, and it has created significant impact in Ireland. And I quickly want to talk about that impact in the last minute or so. I suppose the big moment during the last 3 decades of work on Casement was the publication in 2010 of Mario Vargas Llosa's The Dream of the Celt, which came out a month after he'd been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. And although this is certainly not Mario Vargas Llosa's best book, it did receive tremendous publicity and was translated into several European languages, and in that sense created something of a phenomenon around Casement. I suppose more serious studies in many ways are Jordan Goodman's 2009, The Devil and Mr. Casement, which was actually the book that I set out to write in 1992, but then I got completely sidetracked by realizing that it was necessary to publish manuscript material. Leslie Wiley's wonderfully evocative study of Tropicalismo, Colombia's Forgotten Frontier, a literary geography of the Putumayo. And then the proceedings from a conference held in Bogota at the University of Los Andes in 2012, which was El Paraíso del Diablo, containing a selection of fascinating essays in both Spanish and English on Casement. In 2016, there were a series of events, I mean, dozens of events literally to do with Casement, but the main ones included exhibitions in two of the three main exhibition centres in Dublin. The Hugh Lane put on an exhibition which ran for much of 2016. The National Museum put on a beautiful little exhibition, which is still running actually, in Leinster House. And then there was an excellent exhibition in Kerry County Museum. And there you see in the bottom left-hand corner that was opened on the 21st of April, 2016 by the President, Michael D. Higgins. And there in the top right-hand corner is Sean Hoy, the President Irish ambassador in Brazil, who at that time was in Nigeria. And he put a pop-up exhibition of the Kerry exhibition in Abuja in Nigeria. And then other impacts included a catalogue to the exhibition that Laura curated in the Maria Antonia Centro in Sao Paulo, which Mariana translated and I wrote on Casement in Brazil. Mariana published her PhD dissertation that came out a couple of years ago, which really added very importantly to the extraordinary body of work on the literary interest in Casement. And then there were a lot of key articles. I'm only going to mention three here. Margarita Serge, the Colombian anthropologist, has published in the last few weeks an essay in the Cambridge journal Enterprise and Society, a fascinating essay on credit and debt. To do with the Putumayo that again is absolutely dependent upon the Amazon Journal as a source for the argument. President Michael D. Higgins gave a speech in the Peruvian Department of Foreign Affairs in Lima during his state visit there in early 2017, where he spoke very passionately about Casement's tremendous testament in terms of his humanity, and that essay is now translated and prefaces or begins the Italian version or the Italian translation of the Amazon Journal. And then Gabriel Cabrera Becerra's essay is one of a number of works that have started to look at the Putumayo from a South American perspective. So anyway, those are a few articles, or many more I could have referenced. And finally, of course, we come to Aurélio's film, which I think will really take the whole story onto another level. And I just ready to end want to say what a pleasure it has been over the last few decades communicating with you all, building this idea into a really extraordinary piece of transnational scholarship. And it really means a great deal of me to be here with you all now, speaking about the Amazon Journal. And really from the bottom of my Irish heart, I want to thank you all. And my Peruvian and Amazon heart, actually, I must not.
Perfect. You have to stop presenting then. Thank you. Thank you, Angus. As I said, you are the pioneer in all this work, and we are really very thankful to you and to your support that all of us from different countries have received at the moment that we asked a question to ourselves saying, why translating the the Amazon Journal in Spain, in Brazil, of course, and then in Italy. So what's its relevance and which were the challenges faced to edit and publish these translations? And with this question left, I think I will ask our colleagues, first from Spain, that's José Eduardo Riestra, who is founder of an editor at Ediciones del Viento, as Angus already introduced. And this Ediciones del Viento started life in 2003. And it has become known for its travel books, for which he has recently been awarded the Spanish Geographical Society's Communications Prize. Among his collections, Viento Simón collection includes English language classics, as well as work rescued from neglect by Spanish, Portuguese, and Hispano-American travelers. And he has a long, biodata, we would say, of all his works and collections. And we thank a lot for you being here with us, Eduardo. Then I will speak a bit of course, I am a full professor at the University of São Paulo, that together with Mariana, we coordinated the publication, and we were the editors of the publication. And then we are going to speak about the translators, the team of translators that we set up. And finally, Franco Irawan Esposito-Soekardi is half Indonesian, half Italian, and has lived in Indonesia, India, and England before settling down in Monterotondo, a Risorgimento town near Rome, in a house on Via Gramsci. He graduated from La Sapienza University in History and English Literature with a thesis on Robert Louis Stevenson. Being a chronic bibliophile, he founded Fuorilinea 12 years ago. And then Mario Scotognella taught art history at the Liceo Classico, a consultant with the Emigration and Social Affairs Department of the Italian Foreign Office on the organization of Italian schools abroad. He has taught in Asmara, Eritrea. He is currently conducting a research on Eduardo Baccari, the Italian administrator who was in the Congo at the same time Casement was there. He has lived in Ireland. I'm very curious to know about that, Mario, afterwards. So we'll go around in trying to tell our audience how we come to edit the journal. Please, then. Eduardo, you are first.
Yes, well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Each one applies. Well, the point is, Ediciones del Viento, as you have told before, has been founded in 2003, and it is based in La Coruña, in Galicia, which is a place quite strange for having a publishing company, because the centers of publishing in Spain are Madrid and Barcelona. This is 90% of all the activity of publishing. All the publishing houses are there. We are a small independent publishing company, and we are based quite away from there. So we have weird likes, you know. And one of them is the travel literature. We started with a collection of travel literature called Viento Simón, which is a hot wind from the desert. And we wanted to include there travelers, travel logs, but also literature. For example, the first number of this collection is a novel by George Orwell, which is Burmese Days. And we wanted to collect texts exotic, let's say, exotic places in the world refer to where we live, because obviously Amazonia, from people who live there, is not an exotic place, but their home, but for us at least. And we included there the African explorers, starting from the 17th century, our Spanish Pedro Páez, who discovered the fountains of the Blue Nile, and then at the end of the 18th century, Mungo Park, and also a Brazilian, Lacerda, who was in Africa at that time, and then the 19th century explorers, which was the century of the explorers, with Livingstone, with Cameron later, was running there, Stanley. And we published books of the central part of Africa, but there was this lost chain, or this lost step of the map that was Congo, was the dark part of the dark Africa, the darkest part of dark Africa. We didn't understand what was going there, what had happened there at that time, because we were not experts where we were starting with this, and we had this shadow on Stanley and his activity, his years there. First, we found a book, which is 3 Years in Congo, that was by some Theodore Westmark, who was a Swedish, that was an official of Leopold, the Belgian king of Belgians. And he told the story of his stay there, and spoke also of Stanley, and not very well. So we wanted to know more. And then appeared all the news of the big crime of Congo, and we put together 4 texts from all very different people, which was this George Washington Williams, that was this American man who came at the end of the 19th century, first interviewed Leopoldo, and then went to Congo, and wrote a very, very energetic or a very letter, and then the Casement report, and then sometimes by Arthur Conan Doyle, and finally by Mark Twain. It was a very strange volume that you know. But Casement was there and was writing there. He was a very literary character because of his relationship with Conrad, and he was with Conan Doyle even, and that, and even appearing here in Ulysses. In Ulysses, this sentence here that says, well, says JJ, if they are any worse than those Belgians in the Congo Free State, they must be bad. Did you read that report by a man? What his name is? Casement, says the citizen. He is an Irishman. Yes, that's the man, says JJ, raping the women and girls and flogging the natives on the belly to squeeze all the red rubber they can out of them. That was a very astonishing sentence on that. So we were very curious. And then Angus appeared with his book, the Amazon Journey. And then we all together very quickly understood each other. We were very interested in publishing that book and all the new documents or material, and I started up this team that was a very, very interesting experience, and was what drove us here to this evening to be all together. And this is my experience.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Very interesting, because we follow more or less the same way till we reach Angus, who is the responsible of all this. Yes, Angus, you raise your hand. You want to say something now?
No, it was just, it was applause. It was,
yes, thank you. Okay, well, so I will share, as we are going chronologically, more or less, in this first round of how these translations appear. The Portuguese translation was co-edited, as I said, with Mariana Bolfarine, who translated and coordinated the other translators, who is Mail here present with us, Mail Marques de Acevedo, a professor from the Federal University of Paraná, and Dr. Maria Rita Drummond Viana, who is from the Federal University of Santa Catarina. But the first question that I ask myself is, when did our interest in Roger Casement start? And I will share with you, if you bear with me a bit, I will share with you my screen. Compartilhar. Oh no, sorry. Let me put here. Yes, I have to open first. Right. So it all started, I do not know if it's coming out, the screen.
Yes.
No?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I don't see it. That's why. Now you see it?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Let's start slideshow. Oh my God. Mariana, I need you. I think it is.
down the bottom left-hand corner.
It's okay, yes. So everything starts with a research on the Irish in South America, especially in Argentina. That is where the largest Irish immigration community in a non-English speaking country, of course, on the other side of the Atlantic. But then, of course, all the ships stop in Brazil before reaching Argentina. And so I asked myself, what happened with all these Irish passengers? Were they just going straight to Argentina, or whether some of them stopped in Brazil? And there I came through the figure of Roger Casement as being consul general here in Brazil. And I realized that in the few writings that I found about him here in Brazil, Casement really dismantles the old Irish utopian stories of Brás Brazil and that celebratory image of Brazil and of the tropical land with its exuberant vegetation and sacralization of nature, would say, contrasted completely with the suffering and violence perpetrated over the indigenous people that live in the rainforest. So, and Casement, in a way, would recognize later the humanitarian violations committed not only in Africa, where he was before, and then in South America, that all that was due to the oppression of the empires and associated all this suffering to the suffering of his own people. So when I try to know more about the history of Brazil and to learn whether Roger Casement appears in our own history here in Brazil, I found out that in 1904, Euclides da Cunha writes The Amazon Cycle about the border region between Brazil and Peru and defines the economic slavery by debt. Something that Casement was going to define and to write about in the journal, in the Amazon journal. So I saw also that one of our colleagues in 2003, Maria Helena Machado, writes, she is a historian and writes an article on Marechal José Vieira Couto de Magalhães, and Roger Casement. She compares both of them, their travel diaries, and she defines how sexuality was inscribed in the indigenous bodies in those journals. And in 2012, Leopoldo Bernucci, another professor from UC Davis, wrote an article exactly referring to all the fatal obedience that all these indigenous follow in relation to their oppressors. And he refers to Benjamin Saldaña Roca, the newspapers that he published, La Sanción y la Felpa, and how all these crimes were completely impune, we would say. So after all very quick and not so much findings here, then of course I got to know about the publication of the Amazon Journal by Angus Mitchell. And while we were in an international conference of literature in Limerick, I got in contact with Angus, and generously he came to meet me, and we went to see all his material at home, and then we started considering and organizing all the conferences that comes after that. There were more than 20 events here in Brazil that we have been doing together with colleagues from other universities in Brazil and also abroad, in Argentina, and then we went even to the United States. We went to Ireland and Tralee, and I will show you very quickly some pictures in Manaus. That was our first, commitment with Angus, because it was the centenary of the first travel of Roger Casement to that region. So we organized a conference that also Aurélio Michiles was there, some colleagues from Colombia also, Álvaro Echeverri, and people from the United States came, and also from Brazil. And there were exhibitions, not the first time that we showed the pictures, and we did the first catalog in English. And there was also some exhibitions from the researchers in Manaus that about the Amazon and that period. Here you find also the Abbey Journal that Angus has mentioned, that came out with all the articles of that conference. Then we go, I cannot pass it, I do not know why. Go to the next, okay. Then the following year, it was the second, the centenary of the second travel to the Amazon by Roger Casement, and we did a whole year cycle of conferences and lectures and mini courses, and Angus was there to open it in Maria Antonia, the university. It has a cultural center in São Paulo. And we have there the exhibition and the translation of that catalog into Portuguese by Mariana Bolfarine. Then we come to, thanks to Angus' contacts also, the exhibition was shown in Madrid, in Barcelona, in Tralee, in between 2012 and 2013. And all these exhibitions were accompanied by catalogs, by some explanations, and for the people who were interested in learning more about Roger Casement in Brazil. And in Brasilia, in 2016, we have many events, of course, because of the centenary of the Easter Rising, and also of all what has to do with, of course, with Roger Casement and being judged and his death. So in Brasilia, it was the Embassy of Ireland who organized, together with our university, the exhibition that was in the open air. So it was really very attractive in the middle of all that architecture in Brasilia. Then we went, thanks to colleagues who host the exhibition in their own universities. It was in Tocantins, first in Manaus again in 2016. And then in São Paulo in that same week of St. Patrick's Day. But in São Paulo, we decided to launch another exhibition that was Roger Casement and compared to Silvino Santos' photography in relation to what was happening in the Amazon, in the Putumayo, due to the Peruvian Amazon company. So there was the pro-discourse and counter-discourse of all these crimes that were being committed. And it was here that we launched in all these events the translation of the Amazon Journal. And here we have the whole team that worked in it. Mail, Maria Rita, and Mariana and myself. Then we went to Tocantins, where Dr. Rejane Ferreira hosted the exhibition there too, and in Museu do Estado do Pará, also that was shown in September. As you see, each exhibition, despite the exhibition was the same, they were preparing different material in order to insert Roger Casement in the history of Brazil. Then we went to Argentina at the same time. It was in Universidad del Salvador and ESMA, a very important center in Argentina where the exhibition was shown, in San Juan, in La Plata, in La Pampa, and all that was thanks to our colleague Maria Graciela Eligi, who translated the catalog into Spanish, and also now she is translating Angus.
Sorry, I think Laura must have had problems with her connection. I will get in touch with her. Yes, I think Laura is experiencing technical issues. Let's see. Okay, so while I try to reestablish contact with Laura, maybe I don't know, maybe Franco and Mario or Angus, and then Laura can.
Hello, Laura.
Laura?
Disappeared.
Well, sorry.
Oh, Laura, thank you. Oh, okay, Laura, sorry. Yes.
I do not know where I stopped. Sorry. I think it's a problem. You can continue, Mariana.
No, Laura, it was, you were mentioning the exhibitions and then Mariela's translation of the catalog and of Angus's biography and all the work she has done as well.
Well, I'm sorry. So you missed the last slides. I do not know if I can share it again or just we had some pictures from Peru and from the other places that we have exhibited. Let me see.
Try and show them again, Laura. It'd be great to see them because.
Let's see if I can.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Is it there?
Yeah,
it is. It is. That's the last slide, though.
Here, that was the last one. So don't show it. I think I stopped here in Argentina. Then.
That's where you stopped.
Yes. Perfect. So we went to, as I said, we went to the University of California, Davis, where Professor Leopoldo Bernucci received us and hosted their lectures. Angus was there also, Professor Luke Gibbons, Mariana, and myself, and Mary Daly also, I think she was there too. And it was an exhibition not only of the same one that we offered here in Sao Paulo, the counter discourses and dialogues between Roger Casement and Silvino Santos, but also a very important book exhibition. And then we had the last time that it was shown, the very first exhibition that we launched in 2010. Now it is President Michael D. Higgins in 2017 showing it in Peru. And he was on his way to Cuba when he went to Peru and did a very important lecture there. And finally, we have here Aurélio, who I do not know if I'm repeating myself, but he also had a very important documentary on Silvino Santos. And now in 2020, he launched, we would say, not yet officially, but it was in some festivals participating with his new film. I think it's a masterpiece, Secrets from Putumayo, on the Amazon Journal, his own translation into images. And he is going to tell us afterwards about his last film. So that's it, and now I think it's time for Franco to continue. Thank you.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes? All right. Thank you. Good evening to all of you in Brazil, Spain, Ireland, Calabria, and Rome. I would like to thank you. I would like to thank the William Butler Yeats Chair of Irish Studies at the University of Sao Paulo for having organized this webinar. Laura and Angus for having masterminded this webinar, our first ever transcontinental webinar, which of course prompts me as I talk to scholars and experts of your caliber to ask myself, as Bruce Chatwin did, what am I doing here? We are here, of course, to talk about Roger Casement, and in particular about his Amazon diary, his Diario de la Amazonia, which we are due to publish shortly, following Romina Arena's translation of this groundbreaking work. Romina will tell us later about this monumental task of hers. The book will be over 500 pages long and includes, of course, the Putumayo album. Nothing by Roger Casement had ever been published in Italy, apart from a biography written in 1932 by the Italian journalist and staunch upholder of the freedom of the press, Mario Borsa, a book entitled La tragica impresa di Sir Roger Casement. I think loosely translated would sound Sir Roger Casement Tragic Enterprise, or feat. After which nothing or little else happened for 78 years until 2010, when we published the Congo Report, book number 2 of our catalog, and reprinted 4 times since. Thanks to the extraordinary translation of Mario Scotognella, who will tell us about his amazing work in providing an Italian voice to Roger Casement for the first time ever. I'm perfectly aware that this evening's conversation is about translating the Amazon Diary, for which I would like to recall our great debt of gratitude to Professor Angus Mitchell, who made his outstanding edition available to all of us. But for me, the Italian version of the Putumayo Diary would not have been possible without the Congo Report. I don't actually recall how I first came to hear about Roger Casement. All I remember is that I talked about him to Mario, who, thanks to his background, enthusiastically accepted to translate the report. Mario has lived in Ireland and taught in Africa, and will also tell us something about Casement's Italo-African connection, let's put it that way. When the Rapporto sul Congo finally came out, this is the book. I suddenly received, out of the blue, an email from one Angus Mitchell from Limerick. Thanks to Limerick, and from that point of view, it was from that point onwards, it was inevitable that sooner or later we would have published the Amazon Diary. And Romina was the perfect candidate for the translation, considering her training as a historian and of the contemporary age, who has studied the effects of globalization on the developing world, and with a special focus on Africa and Latin America. So the 2 books are inextricably linked, not only from the publishing point of view, from my publishing house's Forilinea's point of view, but above all, as part of an editorial project where we aim to bring to light events of the past that continue to bear an impact on the present, events of history that continue to be substantially unresolved. And this is exactly what Casement has done and continues to do. And that's why he is so important today as he was when he compiled his Congo Report. As I put down on paper and conclude this short address of mine, I suddenly realize that the reason why I don't actually remember how I first came across Casement is because he has always been there in my consciousness. As an amateur cognoscente of the Victorian age, an age of lame giants, as Chesterton said, you realize that Casement was among the very first to have stressed that with the Victorians, the very vastness, I again quote Chesterton, the very vastness of the number of things they know illustrates the abrupt abyss of the things they do not know. We feel, in a sort of way, that it is a disgrace to a man like Carlyle when he asks the Irish why they do not bestir themselves and reforest their country, saying not a word about the soaking up of every sort of profit by the landlords, which made that and every other Irish improvement impossible. Herein, I believe, lies Casement's greatness. The only man of integrity among the Europeans, as Conrad pointed out. In the speech President Michael Higgins of Ireland gave in Peru during his historic visit there, a speech we have included in the Diario de la Amazonia, points out that Casement never averted his gaze from the ugliness that lay behind the sheen of progress, that lies behind the sheen of progress even today. W.G. Sebald, in his Rings of Saturn, and I conclude, tells us he fell asleep in his hotel room while watching a documentary on Casement. I quote, I fell asleep in the green velvet armchair I had pulled up to the television. As my waking consciousness ebbed away, I could still hear every word of the narrator's account of Casement with singular clarity, but was unable to grasp their meaning. Well, thanks to these books, I now do understand. Thank you very much and for this great opportunity.
Great, Franco, thank you. And Mario, I think will follow you to give his own address.
Okay. The Congo report leaves a deep imprint on the memory for some reasons. First, it contains a vivid narration of many gruesome episodes committed by local soldiery against helpless victims. Some pages are quite disturbing. It was not easy to bear the horrors of death. Occasionally, I had to take breaks to restore my emotional distance. Secondly, Casement's sharp analysis of colonial issues obliged me to plunge into technical aspects of wider fields of study, such as botany, equatorial agriculture, even firearms. Casement's style of writing is regular, terse, and accurate, rich of carefully chosen words. It fronts detachment, nevertheless we perceive a restrained indignation hidden into his communication strategy. In some cases, he switches from the neutral tone of an official report to an emotional storytelling. Just a brief quotation. One of the chiefs, a strong, indeed a splendid-looking man, broke down and wept, saying their lives were useless to them and that they knew of no means to escape the troubles which were gathering around them. Casement achieved two aims: to stick to the facts and to give voice to the wretched people of Congo. Having said that, I would like to highlight two further points. At the end of the Berlin Conference in 1885, a huge area of Central Africa was conceded to King Leopold II of Belgium. Actually, 2,344,885 square kilometers became the private property of a single man. To have an equivalent area, we should have those of Portugal, Spain, France, United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, and Poland. According to David Raybrooke, in Congo, before the year 1885, lived about 400 ethnic groups who spoke 200 different languages. Very few of those communities survived to Belgian rule. The dire tale of the atrocities was very long. Mass killings, manslaughter in cold blood, horrifying mutilations, illegal detention of men, women, and children left to fatal starvation, cruel floggings, imposition of unfair public obligations in terms of rubber and food supplies, vicious penalties in case of non-fulfillment of public obligations. Casement's report proved population decline in Congo beyond any reasonable doubt. In fact, the British consul had already traveled through the immense region of Upper Congo River. In 1887, he was part of the Sanford exploring expedition. On that occasion, he had taken a valuable amount of notes regarding, among other things, number of inhabitants, means of livelihood, commercial exchange, etc. Hence, he was able to make comparisons between past and present. An important question raised by the report still demands an answer. Is population decline a euphemism to indicate a genocide? Figures related to the vast degrees of population vary from 1,800,000 to 10 million. According to the opinion of many scholars, the incalculable number of human losses is not a sufficient proof of genocide. Genocide must be intentional, carried out under a scheme of conspiracy. In other words, without a Wannsee conference, the smoking gun is missing. Albeit this is true, there is a notable occurrence mentioned by Adam Hochschild in his King Leopold's Ghost. In August 1908, the heating plant of the Congo State offices in Brussels burned for 8 days all the Congo State records and archives. I am afraid that smoking gun was right there. The second point, the Italian connection. In one of his numerous encounters, Casement reports the presence of a European officer in the native settlement of Bolobo. In another case, he refers about a punitive expedition led by a European officer in the village of Walla. He omits the names, but we know that they were in service officers of the Italian army. Where were they in Congo? At the time, there were 88 officers and 67 non-commissioned officers, leading the Force Publique, which was a sort of militia responsible for the major atrocities in Congo. This circumstance became notorious a year later when a special envoy of the Italian government, Eduardo Baccari, went to Congo to verify the chance for an Italian colonization of Kivu in eastern Congo. The Belgian rulers had promised to allow an Italian colonization in exchange for the recruitment of Italian officers into the Belgian colonial service. Returned to Italy, Baccari delivered a report in which he denounced the inhuman treatment of natives. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mario. I think it's very interesting to see from Italy exactly all these connections that really helps us to know more and to hope that the journal continues being translated in other countries too, because sometimes the connections are not so visible, but they are there. And of course, the legacy that Roger Casement has left is really very important for all of us. So we come to the second round discussion, we would say, asking the translators which were the main challenges that they faced. Was it language? Was it the historical or the cultural context? So in order to try to answer us and to enlighten us about their difficult job, I would say, to find the right words to translate culture and not only language, I will ask Romina Arena to come to the floor. She is a historian of the contemporary age who has conducted studies on the effects of globalization and westernization in Africa and Latin America. She currently teaches creative writing and is the author of, I do not know how to pronounce this, Legete and Multiplicatevi, a manual on conscious reading and comprehension. Then afterwards, she will be followed by Sonia Fernández Ordás, who is from León, Spain. She has a BA in English philology and postgraduate courses at the University of Santiago de Compostela. She is a senior high school teacher and translator for Ediciones del Viento, Ediciones Maeva, and Harper Holidays Ibérica. And then I will ask Mariana Bolfarine, who holds a PhD from the University of São Paulo and was a research fellow at the National University of Ireland, Maynooth. And Dr. Bolfarine teaches at the Federal University of Rondonópolis, is a researcher at the William Butler Yeats Chair of Irish Studies and head of the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies. She has translated into Portuguese Roger Casement in Brazil, Rubber, the Amazon and the Atlantic World, 1884-1916, which was, as I said, launched in 2010. And then the Amazon Journal of Roger Casement, published in 2016. and is the author, as Angus already mentioned, of Between Angels and Demons, Trauma in Fictional Representations of Roger Casement, 2018. So we'll start with Romina then.
Here I am. Well, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to join two of my greatest passions ever, this Brazil and Ireland, their history, their literature, the costumes, and so on. Well, translating the Amazon journal has been an amazing journey and a tough one. First of all, as a human being rather than a translator. When I did it, I couldn't split the translator off from the historian. Neither can do it now, talking about what I experienced reading and working on the Amazon journal. Because the journal and Casement himself are all in one, an immersive experience and a political apprenticeship, a stimulating training for life and activism, but also an education for our glaze and the way we used to look at the world. So cultural, historical, and political questions come together with a framework which is so detailed in describing crimes, exploitation, and how money and capitalist profit work, the geography and the environment. The technical issues about translating are just a game to solve. It is true that the language is everything but easy. The Casement's language is everything but easy. But the real bet was not to lose anything about the flamboyant passion, the rage, the discouragement, the stubbornness with which Roger Casement lived his times and the circumstances he found in the Putumayo. The real gambling was to run on the linguistic razor's edge of both his indignation and his compassion, that in the end are the two overlapping parts of a same spirit. So I needed to do all my best to keep them together, because for me, his compassion and his indignation are the overall recap of his soul. But what I did notice while looking for information about some aspect to deepen or for the footnotes is that the name of Roger Casement is often related to gossip rather than historical facts, even if his thought is such a pioneering one in the debate on human rights and exploitation of the Indian people. Few things of what he wrote are known in Italy, apart from the report on Congo translated by Mario and the few things Franco said us. And all the rest is not known out of the scholars and authorized personal milieu. What we can easily find on the internet are informations about his life, but not the public one. And overall, nothing of interest for the common people. So maybe we can vindicate this lack of biographical and historical information about him. And yet, we can say he was one of the first revolutionaries fighting for human rights and the dignity of the Indian people. His commitment to the fight has a double value because he was a diplomat and bound to duties to the crown and the foreign office. And we can clearly see this through all the journal, through all the pages he wrote, his attempts to balance his heart with his mind, the boost of his indignation with the neutrality of his role. But also we see that he chose not to be neutral. He did champion the cause of the Indian people. He decided to play a strictly political role in a context in which that behavior was inappropriate and not requested. But precisely because of this, such a behavior was necessary and compromising, no matter the price he did pay, which was a high one for his reputation once he came back to the UK. I think we are still culturally unprepared to embrace such passion of Roger Casement, but we are all the same required to compromise ourselves following the path Casement traced for us, because he traced the path for activism for a better world and a better mankind. Well, his diary put a new light on the years of the 20th century, which have been bloody years and blind about the consequences of the European rising capitalism on the indigenous way of life, ancestral rituals, the culture, the community system they lived in. The Casement breakthrough was to speak out and shut out the criminal system Europe was financing for its progress and development. An act of courage, just like it recalls me the Italian partisans who fought against fascism. If you would ask one of them, one of the Italian partisans, why they did it, they will answer you, there was no plan B. There was no other suitable choice. And here is Casement. He thought he had no other suitable choice but stand for the Indian people. The example he gave to future generation is not to look away when injustice is rising and stricken. And he did many years before Che Guevara did. So I think we can rise him up as a role model for modern environmentalist and humanitarian activism, and his Amazon journal is a real manifesto against today's exploitation and human rights violations. Capitalism is still rising its power and spreading its tools of death and destruction on the poor countries and their people. This means that Casement's era is not ended, nor his teachings are outdated. His message is current and topical. Scholars should implement it into their studies. But above all, activists should be more and more inspired by the way Casement carried his fight against criminals and scoundrels, as he used to call the people exploiting the Indian tribes. And his compassionate gaze should be implemented too. Over his glaze over the many tortured bodies and souls he met during his journey in the Potomac. So I think Casement is still up to date, and it's important for us in Italy to read and study such a brilliant man like him. Thank you.
Thank you for your passionate description of the journal. And I think that those who enter into the words and the journal itself for translating it is what causes, and you really expressed very well. Thank you very much, Romina. Sonia.
Hello. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot, Laura. Thanks a lot, Angus. And of course, thank you, Eduardo, for giving me the opportunity to translate the Amazon journal all these years ago. Right, I totally agree with Romina, of course, in her defense of Roger Casement, in her vindication, the vindication of his figure. And translating the Amazon journal presented a few challenges for us. I mean, for Ediciones del Viento, at the beginning, when Eduardo had the opportunity of publishing it, he asked me to translate it. So the first challenge came when we had to interrupt the book we were doing at the moment, which was also a travelogue, but the Traveler's Eye was completely different because that was by Samuel Cousins, a wonderful country and a trip on Arizona, New Mexico, just, let's say, for fun, which was completely different from the case of Roger Casement. So we had to switch codes completely and see it with fresh eyes. Then, of course, it was the huge responsibility and also the fear of performing the task, the enormous task that, as Romina said, vindicating the figure of this man. And well, we had to fall on our feet and we had to perform well and bring new light or throw light upon his figure, since it was, well, by 90% of people, he's just considered as a pervert and a traitor, which is absolutely unfair, for the things he did, for the things he tried to do. And well, focusing on the language and the actual translating, it was really hard at times, and I'm sure Mariana and Romina agree with me. It was really, really hard to read the things we had to translate, to see the things, to picture the things that he had to witness and he had to report. And well, it was really, really hard at times when he describes the flogging, the sexual abuse, the general abuse, and the Thepo. Remember the Thepo? It was awful. And the little children that had to walk for kilometers and kilometers, so loaded with rubber, and how they got into that, and it was impossible to stop working for them, and as slaves. It was terrible. I mean, it was difficult. It was really, really difficult not to, after what you had to read, and then you did your normal work and your normal life. And I mean, believe me, I did think of that at night, and I said, well, we're so lucky to live where we live. And when you think it was just for the sake of the progress and getting rubber for the cars and all that, you think, was it worth it? Was it worth it? And it was also very, which was the ultimate sentence when Roger Casement concludes, Putumayo was much worse than Congo. For those of you who have read the La Tragedia del Congo, or the report, the Casement report on the Congo. And that is a hard thing to say, that it was much worse than Congo. And I think that's it. And then another challenge, of course, was to agree. Well, it wasn't hard work, but it was a challenge as well to read everything that Angus was sending us that he considered that should be left out or should be included. And of course, depending on the Brazilian public or the Spanish public, some of the things would be more interesting, some others would be not so interested, or maybe they would be unknown and we would have to explain some more, hence all the footnotes that we had to include. But I remember doing it really happily, and getting in touch with Liana and Laura and Mariana. It was great fun. It was really great fun, and it was something different, something I had never done before and I haven't done since. So I thank you all, and thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks, Sonia. Yes, I think that working as a team across the Atlantic is really very rewarding, and I think that that is why Liana and Mariana also together, we have been really enjoying so much doing that first translation of the Amazon Journal into Spanish and then into Portuguese, and now Franco and all his team in Italy. So Mariana, would you like to share your challenges?
Yes, Laura, thank you all. Thank you, Romina and Sandra. It is a privilege to be among such distinguished scholars and colleagues. And as mentioned before, my first contact with Roger Casement took place 11 years ago with the publication of Roger Casement in Brazil, Rubber, the Amazon, and the Atlantic World. And this catalog is unique in the sense that it includes powerful excerpts from Casement's personal and official writings, especially about the time, of course, that he spent in Brazil. And what captivated me the most was his perspective, Casement's, both as an insider, because of course he was British consul in Brazil, and as an outsider, he was a foreigner. And through these excerpts, which of course Angus has curated along with Laura, so they show his fierce criticism towards natural and human exploitation, which of course was really ahead of his time. And of course, his opinion about events that were taking place in the heyday of the rubber boom in Amazonia, such as Barão do Rio Branco's government and Euclides da Cunha's death. And it is still enlightening to see, as Casement has said, my country through the eyes of another race. Thus, when I began translating the Amazon Journal a couple of years later, I was already familiar with Casement and, of course, his monumental importance. As for the translation per se, there are many aspects that I found challenging. Apart from the struggle to convey, as mentioned by Sandra and Romina, Casement's thoughts and feelings, and the way he systematizes very pragmatically his findings. I also found that I am a Brazilian from the southeast of Brazil, and Brazil is as large as it is socially and culturally diverse. So I was actually obliged to delve into my own culture and discover elements and terms and vocabulary and habits which were unknown to me, such as rápidos, correrias, cepos, malocas, muchachos de confiança, words that I know, but which had different meanings in this different context. Of course, the process involving the production of caucho, of rubber, fabrico, chorizos, pelas, de borracha, and so many other words referring to plants and animals and sites, which were, although despite being a Brazilian, they were new to me. So Casement actually opened this world. And it was only later that I had the chance to visit Belém do Pará and Amazonia, because it's very expensive to travel in Brazil, and it's very far away from São Paulo. And moreover, similar to Casement with the British Empire, I was forced to confront the silenced history of my country, as after translating into the early hours, as Sonia has also mentioned, images that Casement describes were imprinted in my mind, such as that of undernourished men, women, and children carrying the tulas, the loads of rubber, as heavy as their own little bodies, and Casement attending the Indians' wounds, giving them to drink from his own bottle of water. So he was very, he felt this empathy towards the Indians. And also the devilish Armando Normand, O'Donnell's harem, and so many aspects of this kind of this modus operandi of rubber, of imperial domination that came to light, and that today constitute a cultural trauma in Brazilian history that could have easily fallen into oblivion. So what is most important, I see, is Casement's transatlantic actions and movements across the three continents, Europe, Africa, the Americans, which nurtured his awareness of colonial violence and his capacity to bring injustice to attention. I feel more aware of the history of my own country, and I am very grateful for Laura and Angus, who have invited me to take part in this journey, as Romina also mentioned. And I often think of Casement, even today with the pandemic and with so much destruction in Amazonia, especially last year with the burnings, with the fires. And I often think of Casement as a message of hope, because even amongst this darkness, this moment of violence and destruction, Casement was able to get his word across and bring us hope. So I think this is his chief legacy to us. And finally, as a technical challenge that Laura and I have faced as organizers was, of course, to standardize the style and vocabulary, because of the work that was undertaken by 3 translators of the Amazon Journal. So myself, Professor Maria Rita Drummond Viana, and Professor Maio Marques de Azevedo, who is here with us today, and who will also, I asked her, Maio, if she can also say a few words about her experience. So thank you, Laura, and everyone.
Thanks a lot, Mariana. I think it's really very interesting to define, we would say, and to focus these different ways of seeing the spectrum of the Putumayo from Casement's perspective as an insider and an outsider at the same time, and this idea of bringing us not only the world of darkness, but mainly hope towards the future, and especially this hope that we need as today in these present days. So Mail, would you like to add something to your task?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Okay, I'm very glad to see all of you, and I'm going to say good afternoon because it is about 3 p.m., but yes. Consider your time differences overruled. Okay. Anyway, I can say that I have never had so much pleasure in participating in a roundtable. I followed with great interest everything that you said. And for instance, Franco mentioned that he was considered, I'm talking about Roger Casement, that the only man of integrity in Europe, and that he never averted his eyes from ugliness. And that's what Casement did for me. And I totally agree with Mariana that it was not hard to translate. The words came, but it was very difficult to translate the thought of such an important man who saw human suffering as something that touched him very closely. And I opened the Amazon Journal, which is Angus's collection of diaries, exactly on this page where Casement say about his plans to disembark the Barbadians in Brazil, because he was very concerned about what was going to happen with those Barbadians who testified against their masters. I have not said a word to any of the Barbados men as to my possible, nay, probable intention of disembarking them all at some point in Brazilian territory, because he knew that they were going to be crushed by their masters. But anyway, what I found very, very rewarding in this translation was to get to know more of our history. I think that you have all put this very, very well in your different considerations, but I feel very proud to be in such an illustrious company this afternoon. And I will have classes online, of course, tomorrow, and I'm going to report everything that happened here to my group of students. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mael. Thank you for giving your considerations too, and for being with us here today. So we are reaching by the end of our roundtable, but the last but not least, of course, the adaptation of the Amazon Journal to the screen is another translation of history. And I think that Aurélio Michiles, who was born in Manaus, and who is a very well-known film director, Brazilian film director, has embarked in this enterprise of creating this documentary. So I will first of all present Aurélio, and then I will show you the trailer so that Aurélio can say some words about it. So Aurélio studied the Institute of Arts and Architecture in Brasilia, and also performing arts at the School of Visual Arts in Parque Lage in Rio de Janeiro. He worked at TV Globo, Bandeirantes, Cultura in São Paulo. He is a screenplay and direction. We can mention among his screenplays In Name of This Land, all at that moment, Secrets from Putumayo was called like that, All for the Love of Cinema, then The Filmmaker from the Jungle, that is the film that I mentioned about Silvino Santos, Cheers for Glauber, Utopics Graphics, Amazonas Theater, Large Brazil and Gigantic Indians, David Against Goliath, Lina Bobardi, The Tree of Fortune that deals with grubber. So you see that throughout the titles of part of his marvelous work, we could see which interests he has to show exactly what is happening here in Brazil through all his documentary life. So I will try, in case my internet fails, please, Mariana, you will take it over, but I will show you the trailer now. Oh, sorry, it started. No, it shouldn't start now. Let me compartilhar. Let me see, Mariana. Now here we are. I can't find my screen, so that's why I have to start again here. Sorry. Here it is. So, compartilhar som. This is Portuguese. Computador. Mariana, it doesn't appear the audio here. I cannot share here my audio. I do not know why. Are you seeing the screen? No. Can't hear you either.
Yes, Laura, let's see.
Yes.
Laura, try.
Let's see if it works. Okay. If it doesn't, you tell me.
Yes, Laura, it's working.
Okay, great.
Heavy rain almost every night. I shall be in the wilderness for fully 4, perhaps 6 months. All the region has rubber, but no labor, save its Indian tribes. The present system is not merely slavery, but extermination. The Amazon, is there no limit to human suffering? God knows how this will end.
Well, it's happening the same as earlier, that I don't find my screen, Mariana. Here it is, perfect. So how do I stop it?
It's already stopped, Laura, it's fine.
Okay. Thank you. So, Aurélio, boa tarde, boa noite. Gostaríamos então de ouvir de você a respeito do filme, o que fez você iniciar essa empreitada, esse belíssimo trabalho que você teve como resultado de uma dedicação de vários anos. E também aqui cabe a nós também agradecer muito o apoio que sempre recebemos da Embaixada da Irlanda e do Consulado Geral da Irlanda em São Paulo, para que a cátedra possa realizar esse tipo de pesquisas conjuntas com um resultado que possa chegar realmente à sociedade e que possa transcender as fronteiras. Aurélio, bem-vindo.
Obrigado, Laura. Quero agradecer a você e a Mariana e ao Angus e os demais companheiros dessa conversa. Estamos aqui para celebrar Roger Casement. Essa nossa conversa, as traduções, só reafirma o espírito transcontinental que Roger Casement fez da sua vida. Ele foi um personagem que atravessou fronteiras, línguas, religiões e sonhos. O sonho do celta tem muito a ver com como ele mesmo se retratou, como o sonho do celta. Se Mariana traduz agora.
Yes, Aurélio, thank you. So as Aurélio mentioned, we are here to celebrate Roger Casement, and the translations of the Amazon Journal, they reaffirm that Casement's transatlantic figure who crossed boundaries and dreams, as attested by his dream of the Celt. Pronto, Aurélio.
A importância das traduções do diário do Roger Casement é de uma importância transcontinental. Por quê? eu tive essa experiência. Quando comecei a pesquisar sobre essa história, era muito comum encontrar a opinião de historiadores peruanos, colombianos, até brasileiros, como se o Roger Casement fosse um intruso, um agente britânico que veio para destruir a economia da borracha na Amazônia. Mas quando eu fui filmar no Putumayo, que eu tive contato físico com os índios, alguns textos em espanhol que eles que tinha mudado a opinião deles. Eles descobriram que o Roger Casement, ao contrário do que foi ensinado a eles, foi um cúmplice, um parceiro para que o mundo ficasse sabendo das atrocidades acontecidas ali no Putumayo. Daí as traduções são de enorme importância, como foi para mim também. Da tradução, quando o Angus me deu em inglês, claro que eu fiz um esforço enorme para compreender o trabalho do Angus, mas quando veio a tradução em português, as coisas esclareceram de uma maneira revolucionária, eu diria.
Okay, so yes, so to Aurélio, the translations are of a transcontinental importance because from his experience when he began to research Roger Casement because of his film as a filmmaker, he discovered different opinions about Roger Casement, diverging opinions, such as Casement. Some historians actually saw Casement as an intruder who was there to destroy the rubber boom, the rubber economy in the north of Brazil. But his contact with other historians and with the Indians themselves showed otherwise, showed that they saw, in fact, Roger Casement as a supporter to reveal the atrocities. And that is why, and Aurélio, as a speaker of Portuguese, he could have full access to the journal only via the Portuguese translation. So this is why he finds the translation into Portuguese and other translations so important.
Recentemente, por causa da repercussão do filme, eu fui contatado por uma líder indígena lá que mora em Manaus, e ela é Wiltoto, ela se chama Wanda Ortega, e ela estudou na Universidade do Amazonas, ela é formada em enfermagem e tem mestrado, e é uma potente líder em Manaus dos índios. E ela quis me saber por que eu me interessei por isso, e o interessante é que, a partir de uma entrevista minha publicada no jornal em Manaus, ela comprou o diário Roger Casement da EDUSP, e ela leu, e aí ela tomou conhecimento dessa voz, da potente voz de Roger Casement sobre os acontecimentos ali no Putumayo. Então, o cinema, os livros, as traduções, elas têm esse papel, né, de unir as pessoas, como nós agora estamos fazendo, nos conhecendo e nos trocando informações. O cinema tem esse papel.
Yes, so Aurélio mentioned that because of the impact of the film, an indigenous Witoto woman who is a nurse and who holds an MA and is a leader among the Witotos in her tribe, actually bought, so she knew of the film, she got to know about the film by reading an interview that Aurélio gave to a newspaper in Manaus. and she bought a copy of the Amazon Journal into Portuguese, and thus the whole history and Casement's writings became known to her. So this is the importance that Aurélio mentions, not only of the translations, but also of the film, and how cinema and, of course, translation, by way of translation, these histories become accessible to people.
Só para falar um pouco do filme, do meu interesse, a história da borracha, da economia da borracha para nós da Amazônia como um todo, a Amazônia que fala espanhol, a Amazônia que fala português, a Amazônia que fala francês, a Amazônia que fala inglês, é um trauma, sobretudo para a geração, como a minha geração, que nasceu nos anos 50. Nós crescemos com aquelas histórias sobre o boom da borracha, depois a decadência da borracha e as histórias terríveis em volta disso. Então, eu desde garoto me interessei por essa história e eu venho buscando a cada ano, a cada tempo, respostas para essas perguntas que me surgiram desde criança. Eu tenho a impressão que eu não estou falando por mim, eu estou falando por uma enorme população da Amazônia que deve se fazer essa mesma pergunta, mas não tiveram oportunidade de alcançar respostas. Eu creio que esse filme, Segredo do Putumayo, é uma resposta. Creio que não é uma 100% das respostas, mas é um recorte, é um impulso para que nós continuemos a se perguntar e avançar e lutar pelo aquilo que o Roger Casement lutou, que são os direitos humanos.
Yes, so to Aurélio, the history of rubber in the Spanish, French, and English-speaking Amazon. So to them, the rubber boom, its decay and also its boom is like a trauma. And about this trauma, he is constantly seeking answers. So he proposes, so there are many questions that he asks and that are also asked by others. So he feels in a way that he is speaking not only on his behalf, but on behalf of these others who also ask these questions. Putumayo as an answer to these questions, so that we can process all this in a contemporary fashion.
Bem, eu agradeço mais uma vez estar participando desse encontro e quero imensamente exibir esse filme para o maior número de pessoas, em todas as línguas, em todas as religiões, em todos os povos. Espero que vocês consigam assistir o filme. Muito obrigado.
Yes, Aurélio is thankful for being to be part of this roundtable session, and he hopes that his film will be screened in many countries for many people of many religions and backgrounds, cultural and ethnic backgrounds, and so he thanks everybody. Obrigada, Aurélio.
Desculpa, hay una pregunta que es muy importante, que ¿cuándo es que vamos a poder ver el filme?
Eso.
Essa é a resposta de $1 milhão.
Você mostrou-nos um pedaço para fazer-nos fome. E agora...
Exato.
Uma migalha.
Exatamente.
Não, por causa da pandemia, nós fomos surpreendidos pela pandemia. O filme, ele inclusive, ele foi finalizado com as pessoas remotas, que nem como nós estamos fazendo aqui. A música foi feita pelo músico em Toronto, cada um no seu lugar. E assim, isso impediu que o filme fosse exibido com rapidez. Então, ele teve uma participação num único festival aqui no Brasil. Recentemente, teve uma estreia na América do Norte, que foi no festival Hot Talks, lá em Toronto, no Canadá. E agora nós estamos também inscritos em outros festivais internacionais, esperando ser selecionado para ser exibido. Mas, com certeza, até o final deste ano, nós vamos lançar o filme nas salas de cinema e também em streaming.
Yeah.
Mariana?
Bem compreendido.
Sim, sim, muito obrigado.
Okay, okay. All right,
Yes.
if you understood, but we are all waiting for that launch of the official launch in the theater, we would say, and the film theater. And of course, Aurélio doesn't say so, but he already won an award. And so he has received excellent reviews from a great number of specialists. And we are very hopeful about this film, his film that is really his masterpiece. That's what I am suspicious to say so, but nevertheless, we have reached at the end of the end of this session. It took more time than we expected, but I really thank all of you for your participation. It was a very fruitful discussion and presentation. I think that we need to prepare other ones in the near future, especially when the film is being really launched also, in order to come back, because I think that there are different perspectives from translations that are really very enriching for us to understand our world nowadays. And I do not know if Angus would like to say the final words, because he is the responsible for all of us to be here. And besides, we have a surprise, a very, very short reading in the 4 languages. So I will ask Angus to come in and say his final words about this meeting. And then you start reading in English, and then all the people in their own translation. No, you don't have it now?
No, I don't have it. I should have. Okay, I can get it. I might read it.
Don't worry. We will read in the other languages.
Can you find it, Laura, and read it? No, I will. Yeah. I have got it somewhere. Look, what I would say very quickly is, firstly, thank you. It's a really wonderful event and really emotional for me, and I all that kind of empathy in a way that Casement feels for the suffering is really evident, I think, in how this conversation has gone. So it really moved me, and thanks. But I suppose what I would say, one thing about the film, I think the film in a funny way changes all of the translations, in the sense that the image now is so powerful. When you see the film, you will be kind of blown away by it, because suddenly all those kind of fragmented images come together within this really strong narrative. And I think I really do believe that we enter another kind of phase, in a way, with the Amazon Journal on the back of Aurélio's film. So and that's what I'll say, and I really will keep in touch with you all. I'll send you a mail at the end of this, and let's all keep in touch and really try and work out how we can best, in a way, publicize the film when it reaches each of the countries in which we are, and keep us informed on that. the passage I chose, which I don't have in front of me, I'm afraid, is a passage where Casement mentions human rights for the first time. Sonia, do you have the passage? Did you send it to me?
You have it there in the chat.
To you.
Okay,
yes,
that's great. Thank you. So this is the passage in which he mentions a crime against humanity, or he defines what is happening as a crime against humanity, and this is a really early use of that terminology, and I think in the end it really speaks for what is happening. So I'm going to read it, and then each of the translators, Sonia, Mariana, and Romina, are going to read that same passage in the language into which they translated this passage. So he says, "This thing we find here is carrion, a pestilence, a crime against humanity. And the man who defends it is consciously or unconsciously putting himself on the side of the lowest scale of humanity and propagating a moral disease that religion and conscience and all that is upright in us should uncompromisingly denounce." Okay, Sonia.
Yes, one moment. Lo que nos hemos encontrado aquí es carroña, pestilencia, un crimen contra la humanidad, y el hombre que lo defienda, consciente o inconscientemente, se está degradando a sí mismo al puesto más bajo de la escala de la humanidad y propagando una enfermedad moral que la religión, la conciencia y cualquier traza de honradez que llevemos dentro debería denunciar incondicionalmente.
Mariana.
O que encontramos aqui é carniça, uma pestilência, um crime contra a humanidade, e o homem que o defender está, conscientemente ou não, alinhando-se com as mais baixas extrações da humanidade e propagando uma moléstia moral que a religião, a consciência e tudo o que temos de honra e dignidade devem denunciar sem concessões.
And Romina.
Questa cosa che troviamo qui puzza di carogna, una pestilenza, un crimine contro l'umanità. E l'uomo che la difende si sta mettendo consapevolmente o inconsapevolmente sul gradino più basso dell'umanità e sta diffondendo una malattia morale che la religione e la coscienza e tutto ciò che è retto in noi dovrebbe irremovibilmente denunciare.
Thank you all. I think that with this reading, we can close our meeting, and thanks a lot to everybody. I know that it is very late at night there on the other side of the Atlantic, but thank you for participating, and I hope all our audience also has enjoyed this discussion and this dialogue. Thanks a lot, Aurélio, Franco, Mario, Romina, Sonia, Angus, Mariana, and I think I haven't missed anybody else. Sorry, Eduardo, please. Thank you. Thanks to all. And
thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus, because you have started everything.
No, thanks. A lovely evening. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Grazie. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Obrigado.
Ciao.
Obrigado.
Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.